Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Dissipation of Glamour. Now, this is actually our 99th session, so we're just about to turn over into the 100th session, and, we can easily see that this will last a while as we investigate these matters. This morning, we dealt with the science of triangles and worked especially with what's called the second triangle, which rules hierarchy. It is Pisces, Uranus, and hierarchy, and the fusion of that triangle with the third triangle, which rules humanity. And that triangle was Capricorn, um, Mercury, and of course humanity. Very interesting. One of the things that really stood out for me was that these six types of energy will be the types of energy needed in order to stimulate the sixth root race, which will begin maybe in another, already you can feel the signs of its beginning, but more in another 2,000 years or so. When we begin to enter the age of Capricorn, a time, I think, of considerable initiation. We're I want to say that we're also working. I've given you an externalization of the hierarchy link because I'm doing some work there in commenting on the essays that inaugurate the Second World War. And they're sort of the foundation of everything that is existing today. And as a matter of fact, I think we are still in that great war. And the question is, I think it will have three phases. And already we're in that phase and final phase, which has simply not precipitated on the physical plane in the dramatic way that World War I and World War II did. And we hope through our efforts as disciples all over the world that we can prevent that type of precipitation, because it would be disastrous for humanity. So we have a lot of work to do, and what amazes me, that even though this is quasi-historical, and we're going back 80 years or so, the beginning part of the book I'm going to take up a little later because it's still earlier, but I want to get right into the crisis period of 1938 and 39, when war was declared and the second aspect of the war, which had gone underground, emerged again. Those factors exist in a way that really calls attention to things we have to do right now. His advice is constantly applicable. It may have been 80 years ago, but it is still fresh and new, and we still have not yet accomplished what we must. And it'll be up to us during especially these next 6 years of the era of the Forerunner to do that. Also, I want to say that Tuya and I have been collaborating with Alex Radcliffe. There's a big vote again coming up in England or United Kingdom, and we're going to offer a kind of vigil. Part of it will be a broadcast, and maybe part of it will be a webinar to give you a chance to talk about. There's a big vote coming up around the time of 7 p.m. on Tuesday the 15th, so just next week, and it's going to be about whether or not there is an acceptance of Theresa May's proposal. All of this is of the utmost moment because in the hands of the United States, which is presently severely challenged by the counterforce, and of the United Kingdom and of Russia lies the future of the human race, the Tibetan tells us. This morning I answered a question that was put to me about the seventh ray and Uranus, and we found that all of these groups, these national nations and national centers, they all had the seventh ray and Uranus prominent, either through Aquarius or Libra. So we have to make sure that unity is served, and because the Black Lodge, the forces of materialism, they always work through dividing. They divide and they conquer, and there's a big onslaught right now to create divisions where there should not be. So anyway, we will get that to you via the constant contact and via the student union and via the media. Tui and I will work that out, and Alex has already given us some information on that, and we'll let you know when all of that will start and what the links will be. I would say within a day or so, you should have what you need to join us. And remember, it's when we're doing a broadcast, it's simply Moria Federation Esoteric Education. It's our live link, and we use the same for all broadcasts in order to simplify things now. And then when it comes to the webinar, we'll have to create one of those, and we'll get the link to you. All of this is the project of approximately the next day or so. Now, we were working here in December, maybe almost a month ago, and DK talked about 5 types of glamours which hold humanity in slavery. You know, when you look at the word thrall, it does mean enslavement. And if you tell someone that they look enthralling, it's not necessarily a compliment. Basically, you're admitting that you are captured somehow into slavery by their appearance. So the word thrall is a somewhat negative word, and we won't get through all of these tonight, but they are very important. The glamour of materiality, the glamour of sentiment, which is so important in Rule 11 in the Rays and the Initiations. We'll look at a quote from that. The glamour of devotion, it's particularly a sixth ray glamour, and the glamour of the pairs of opposites, you know, the struggle between the soul and the personality and becoming consumed by that struggle instead of finding the way to balance them, and then the glamours of the path. So this time, maybe we'll do the first 2 or so. I just want to say that we're working out a system now whereby the people in America and in the, well, even more so in South America, because they're really caught in the middle of the night, can join our Science of Triangles webinars, which is right now working in Esoteric Astrology, because that 100-page section is really very focused on what triangles really are from a technical point of view, from the scientific point of view. So we'll have alternating nights and mornings on Fridays, and sometimes you'll have the dissipation of glamour in the morning and sometimes in the evening. I'm talking about GMT. And sometimes you'll have the science of triangles in the morning and sometimes in the evening. And I haven't been happy with the fact that our science of triangles work has somehow cut out a lot of South Americans and Americans and Canadians because of the very late hour, except on the West Coast. So now this is going to be remedied. Okay, we hope. It's a lot of a lot of work, but on the other hand, very important material. So let's get into some of these glamours, the very first of which, well, I guess, I see some of you were here this morning, and I just want to welcome you, Alexandra, Anne-Marie, Annette, Antoinette, Carl, Christelle, Deborah, Diana, Francois, Frida, and if you have a technical question, maybe Michael or BL can help with that. Frida, Gretchen, and Jean-Pierre, and Yoke, and Yopie, Karen, Catherine, Marianne, Martha, Natnia, Nienke, Olivia, Risto, Stacia, Susan, Suzanne, Tiu, Tuya, Veronique, Yvonne, and Zenaide. And over here on the staff side, we have BL and Michael, Stacy, and myself, trying to make sure we don't get into any trouble. So let's think now about our own relation to glamour, and these glamours which are particularly prevalent in humanity. Let's also remember that there were such subtle glamours that DK almost had difficulty naming them. And and they were very unique to the individual concerned. So, if you had the master as your guide, he could probably be much more specific about the kinds of glamours which might assail you in some way. But now we're talking about certain general glamours which hold humanity in thrall. And the very first one here, more in detail, as he says, the glamour of materiality. So he says it is somewhat loosening its grip upon humanity, but just ages. It's been there, and in many ways, Atlantis was a very materialistic age because of the stimulation beyond all natural decency of the factor of desire. So anyway, the glamour of materiality is the cause of all the present world distress. For what we call the economic problem is simply the result of this particular glamour, and we certainly see when we look, at the distress of human beings that so much of it is economic. I'm thinking about what's going on in the United States and how many people from Central America being driven off their land either by crime or by climate change, the impossibility of having a decent harvest. They are heading for the north, where they think economic opportunity will be better. And this is, with climate change, we may have areas of the earth previously habitable, which are now becoming uninhabitable. So the whole question of boundaries and borders really come into consideration. DK says eventually even such a thing as a passport will be considered a sign of separativeness, and that people have to be free to move without restraint from one place to another. Well, such is the case of the warring idealisms at the present time, that could be dangerous, but the time will come, no doubt. So people, simply this planet can support the people and the kingdoms, the various kingdoms which find their expression on this planet. This, of course, our major consideration is humanity, but of course the animal and the plant kingdom and even the mineral kingdom, they have to be considered, and we do have to solve this economic problem, which is basically a problem of dull perception. The glamour of materiality, I'm saying, is a problem of dull perception. We'll get more into that. Down the ages, this glamour has held the race increasingly interested. Interesting way of saying that, because after all, it's simply a symbolic system. We decide that something is of value, a metal is of value, paper with certain numbers on it is of value, and we become focused on acquiring those symbols so that we can exercise power in our social and national contexts. It's quite artificial in a way. It's not real value at all, but it's the way we have decided to operate. DK did tell us that the whole factor of money might be removed unless humanity could solve its issues with regard to sharing. And we do remember that unless some degree of sharing is on its way and actually being practiced, the Christ cannot return. Also, the measure of peace and house cleaning and all of that. So they may seem like simple things, but we do not have an immediately, I think, imminent return of the great Lord. Too much has to be done, as I've said many times. Down the ages, this glamour of materiality has held the race increasingly interested until today the entire world is swept by the rhythm of the money interest. It's interesting how he uses the word interest, isn't it? I mean, it is in a way a financial term that allows you to make money off of money, but it is kind of a preoccupation for many people, for many people, and especially those on the third ray and to a certain extent on the seventh ray, the two financial rays. A rhythm emanating from soul levels has always existed, being established by those who have freed themselves from the control of material requirements. After all, what does a master need? What does a high soul need? They can generate what they need through the power of Kriya Shakti. They can create what they need, just the way Master R could. But then, of course, he had proven that financial interest had no hold over him, and thus the source of supply was released to him, and he became fabulously wealthy. But the great irony, is that some of the jewels that he gave out at his lavish dinners disappeared once they were put in the drawer at home by those who found them as place settings. So they were a sort of apports. They were precipitations of a temporary nature. It must have been quite a surprise for people to have their precious jewel just vanish into thin air. Anyway, a rhythm emanating from soul levels has always existed, being established by those who have freed themselves from the control of material requirements, and that's held out to us, of course, as a necessity from the thraldom of money and the love of possessions. These material possessions are concretions. They are precipitations. They are, in a way, not even real. The reality lies behind them in the causal nature found on the etheric planes and on still higher planes. So, you're grasping for yourself something that is the least permanent aspect of divinity, but people don't realize that because they are, caught in their senses, and they are dull to the internal vibratory levels, which are far more real. So what I put here basically is that concretions are not causes. If you love that which is just going to disappear anyway, in the old saying, you can't take it with you, well, there's going to be a lot of disappointment. Let's just say, what should it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his own soul. So we have to take with us the true treasures of the causal body and not these false treasures that we cling to and which are essentially unreal, even though they seem like the most real factors because they're so apparently tangible. Anyway, this is the rhythm from the soul. Today, that higher rhythm is, I would say at last, commensurate with the lower rhythmic glamour. So the interior attitude of true values is catching up with false valuation of those things that we think we need, but we really don't at all. And we'll pass through, what does he call it, the desert experience. And it will prove to us that we don't need those things. And hence, the whole world is thinking in terms of the way out of this present material impasse. We cannot judge all value by materiality. That is a great mistake, a huge mistake. Those souls who stand in the light to be found upon the mountaintop of liberation, the initiates, and those who are advancing upward out of the fogs of materiality are now sufficient in numbers to do some definite work in connection with the dissipation of this glamour. And so I think we can, some of the glamour work we try to do to take up this issue of the glamour of materiality is an important one. The influence of their thoughts and words and lives can and will bring about a readjustment of values. See, values is what it's all about. The initiate on the first rate particularly works for the preservation of the best values, but all initiates really are working for that which can go into the causal body and is truly of value and not of false estimation. We have so often a false estimation as to value, just like we don't know what the essence of things are. So we have to understand what is truly valuable to our spiritual life and to the spiritual life of humanity and to the manifestation of the divine plan. So we can, in our groups, help to bring about a readjustment of values and a new standard of living for the race. Now, when the free energy component enters, a lot of people will be shocked that they cannot distinguish themselves as better than others because of their ownership of certain hydrocarbon-based sources of energy. The free energy will place humanity more and more on an equal footing, and people will be ranked by their true worth, which is basically what we find in the soul body. So a new standard of living for the race based upon clear vision, which is really the opposite of glamour, a correct sense of proportion, which is Libra, and one of the important energies in being rid of glamour, and a realization of the true nature of the relationship existing between soul and form, between spirit and matter, and that is, for most people in the world right now, that is terra incognita. That's an unknown area, an unknown land. That which will meet a need that is vital and real ever exists in the divine plan. Now, if it's a real need. So obviously, each one of us can be questioned in terms of our wants, our desires, and our true needs. And I venture to say that probably, none of us is free from wants that are not truly needs. Okay, so that which will meet a need, which is vital and real, a living need, ever exists and can be met. Now, notice this next sentence, which is very interesting. That which is unnecessary to the right expression of divinity, the non-essential, and to a full and rich life can be gained and can be possessed, indeed, but only through the loss of the more real and the negation of the essential. And that, as I quoted it earlier from the Bible, this you can gain the whole world and lose your own soul. And I think Ralph Waldo Emerson, he said some interesting things about possessions. He says, things are in the saddle and ride mankind. Things are in the saddle and ride mankind. And there's some kind of statement about in getting and spending, we lay waste to our true capabilities. I'm not quoting it exactly correctly, but the idea is getting and spending. Now, obviously, it's really important, to use this symbol of energy that we call prana, and we've symbolized it with the factor of money, and for a while we work in this way. But we cannot be misled such that we think that the symbol is the thing in itself. It just isn't. And so when free energy, and there'll be a big fight about that one, of course, is liberated for the welfare of humanity, then where people really stand in terms of the true values will be revealed. And the whole idea of simply having, without merit and without a real sense of values, all of that will subside. This is all part of the transition from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. The age of Aquarius is the age of free energy. The age of Pisces is related to, all of the oil and coal and sort of hydrocarbon-based sources of energy, which turn out to pollute our environment in a way that no longer can be acceptable. It's now challenging, and many people, and taking away their source of livelihood. They're afraid their homes, their cities will be consumed by the rising water. They are choking to death in great cities which have sought industrialization through hydrocarbons above all things, as if that would give the power. And the expense is in the falling down of the health of the people. There are many things like that where we are putting secondary things first. We're putting power, egotistic power ahead of the welfare of people because our sense of values is not right. Okay. Students, however, need to remember that which is necessary. Now, this is a very interesting idea, If you've been through many lives and someone is just starting a series of lives that you long ago have been part of, gone through, the needs are different, aren't they? So be aware of that. Students, however, need to remember that which is necessary, what we really need, varies according to the stage of evolution which has been reached by an individual. I mean, you don't expect a child to have the same needs as an adult. And this is what we're talking about here. For some people, for instance, and let's see if we can really understand this. Excuse me. For some people, for instance, the possession of that which is material may be as great a spiritual experience and as potent a teacher in life expression as the more elevated and less material requirements of the mystic and the hermit. I'm reminded of how Ramakrishna, famous yogi saint really, in India, how he lived. And a simple room, maybe one little chest of drawers next to his bed, actually very small. Everything was in total order, and there was just nothing there but simplicity. But people have to learn how to handle the material element, and that's on the way to an eventual simplification. So not all types of possessions suit all people. And so he's asking us to be, very aware of this so we do not sit in the seat of the superior person. So the possession of that which is material, learning how to handle it, learning how to build, learning how to arrange, learning what is the values among material things, it can be, he says, as great a spiritual experience and as potent a teacher in life expression as the more elevated and less material requirements of the mystic or the hermit, which just wouldn't do. It would not do for so many people. The mystic and the hermit might be able to live on a mantram, or on a simple book or a simple kind of contact with the inner worlds, which would be totally inaccessible to the person with less experience in incarnation. Then he says, we are rated as regards action and point of view by our place upon the ladder of evolution. So it's very relative, and we cannot judge. We cannot sit in the seat of a judgment. We are rated really by our point of view. It's kind of a quality of consciousness, and our needs arise from the quality and refinement and expansion and depth of our consciousness. And we have to be so discriminating not to imagine that our needs, as let's say students of occultism and people who've had a relatively lengthy period upon the path of self-improvement and upon the spiritual path, we cannot imagine that our needs are the same as those who have not yet begun to tread the path. Okay, so we are rated really by our point of view and not by our demand upon life. Okay, well, in other words, a demand is a desire, and we can't say, okay, in an absolute sense, these are low demands, these are high demands. It really depends on the consciousness that is doing the demanding. We still want things and consider them to be needs that the master has long outgrown. Somewhere in Agni Yoga, that series, he says, hang up your armor, and it's no longer useful to you, but the person who's coming along will find it of use. So, to be able to think relatively about this issue is very important, and not to use any kind of absolute judgment about the quality of the demand. It may be low for us, but just right for someone else. The spiritually minded man and the man who sets his feet upon the path of probation and who fails to attempt the expression of that which he believes, okay, there's the signal, will be judged as caustically, harshly. That word caustic, it reminds one of acid, which can eat away. It's so strong, it eats away structures. It will be judged as caustically and pay as high a price as does the pure materialist, the man whose desires center around substantial effects, if they are, notice the word, substantial effects. He may be a materialist from our point of view, but he's dealing with what is necessary. So, it's difficult to turn all people away from materialism because it is a type of perception which is limited and which does not take into consideration the hidden factors, okay? But until the person is ready for that, we cannot force it upon them, just the way DK often tells us we're just not ready for what he has to say, but one day we will be. Okay. So I think this is such an important lesson. Bear this in mind and sit not in the seat of the judge or the scornful. It never suits to be a scornful person because it goes along with pride, and pride goes along with that inevitable fall. Pride goes before a fall because you're so puffed up you just don't look where you're going. I've been searching into the roots of World War II and some of the thoughts that had been there, and there was a Nazi ideologue by the name of Alfred Rosenberg. Maybe not too much is known about him, but you will, if you read some of his philosophy and ideology, you will find the height of scorn for different political systems, different races, different nations. Always Germany in the Nordic perspective is above everything, okay? And everything else is cast away in scorn in a very unfair way. In his view of the relationship between women and men is absolutely unbelievable. It's almost like the most rigid kind of setting roles which have to do with a biological basis. So, we have a lot of thinking that has caused terrible results in the world. And, this particular man, he was not a soldier. He was not planning for specifics of conquest and all the rest, like some of the others in Hitler's evil group. But nevertheless, he was hanged with all the others because of the power of his thought and how it led to crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, and so forth. It's an unpleasant experience to see what he wrote, but it's good to know that what these servitors of materiality, especially the extremely intelligent ones, might be able to write. It's just, horrible to listen to, but at the same time, we have to know what the enemy is thinking. Now, today, the glamour of materiality is lessening perceptibly. Now, this is 80 years ago, so let's see, is this still the case? You notice that in some countries, it's attempting a comeback, especially in the United States at this time. But Mars, which is rough and crude and material and non-sacred, reached a kind of apotheosis of its power. I think it was 1946. And that crudeness began to subside. And instead, the occult nature of Uranus is emerging. Also, you'd be surprised how material Pisces can be, but it also is subsiding. The peoples of the world are entering. Now notice this, and think of John the Baptist, and think of where he proclaimed his vision and how he looked at himself like a voice crying in the wilderness. Maybe sometimes the new group of world servers feels that way, as if nobody's listening, but one must persist because eventually it will overcome the resistance. What is the wilderness? It's you just have to make do with what you can find to live. And humanity is entering the wilderness experience. That's very interesting. And we will thereby discover, as he says here, we will find in the wilderness how little is required for full living, true experience, and real happiness. And he warns some of the richer countries that you may miss this invaluable experience if you become overly fascinated with your acquisitions. Right now, I'm thinking about the United States. I know the chart fairly well, and there's a lot of the sign Cancer in it, which has to do with material fulfillment and grasping. And it's in the second house, one of the material houses of the zodiac. So Jupiter in Cancer in the second house, it's got material abundance, but there's the danger of being captivated by that particular glamour and never seeing reality because you think you have to have what you are grasping. Look how he describes this. The gluttonous desire for possessions is not regarded as so reputable as a desire is formerly. You can even see this in architecture. You know, sometimes you see these beautiful, clean, spare houses with very little in them, but the design is beautiful and very modern in that respect. And then you go back to the Victorian clutter. You go into the homes of the wealthy during the Victorian period. It was absolutely jam-packed with all kinds of unnecessary things. You could barely walk. So, you know, perhaps during this 19th century period, we learned gradually to rid ourselves of the need of these cluttering things and move into something far more streamlined, more modern, more beautiful, and, you know, something that would give us a freedom that could not be had if we are surrounded by the very expensive clutter. Okay. So the gluttonous desire for possessions is not regarded as so reputable a desire as formerly, and the desire for riches is not producing the clutching hands as earlier in racial history. I imagine he told us Atlantis was terrible in this respect because the desire nature had been artificially stimulated by the Black Lodge, and heights of desire were reached, heights of desire for the luxurious and the unnecessary that we can't even understand today. It was so grasping at the time. Well, maybe, you know, the mind was not so developed as to compare what is necessary from what is wanted. Okay, so a desire for riches is not producing the many clutching hands as earlier in racial history. Things and possessions are slipping out of the hands which have hitherto tightly held them, and only when men stand with empty hands. Now, this is, you know, you can see here how we're heading towards renunciation, how we're heading towards crucifixion. Only the empty, nail-marked hands can distribute, you know, the blessings of the ages. That's not exactly the quote, but empty, nail-marked hands is what is required. And the nails keep you from reaching. They keep you from reaching for that which you hitherto may have sought to clutch. And only when men stand with empty hands and a realized new standard of values do they acquire the right to own and to possess. I'm remembering, you know, some stories about when Master R, or as the Count de Saint-Germain, arrived in France, and rumors about his fabulous wealth circulated throughout the aristocracy. Well, the aristocracy cared a great deal about these things. Master R didn't care at all. It was just a means to an end. But it was an entree for him right into the court, because the court figured it could benefit from such a wealthy man. Okay, when desire is absent, now measure yourself. When desire is absent, and the man seeks nothing for the separated self, the responsibility of material wealth can again be handed back to man, but his point of view will then be free from that particular glamour, and the fogs of astral desire will be lessened. I think we can think of some of the masters and how much of the uh, money element, we might call it, they commanded. Master R, Master M, Master KH, they had at their disposal what they needed, and they came into very wealthy families or somehow earned it, but they could, as a result of that, use it without uh, tainting their motives, because they really, being developed as they were, sought nothing for the separated self. They sought for the one self, which is humanity, and thereby the riches of the universe, or at least of the planet, were granted to them for their use. Okay, so we want to find ourselves in that position, that we seek and ask nothing for the personal self as a separated unit. All right. Illusions in many forms may still hold sway, because it takes a long time to be rid of illusion following liberation from glamour, as we're told. But the glamour of materiality will be gone. And this is really important. It is the first glamour. It is the first which is destined to disappear. And we might say, just in time, too. There are certain countries that really, really need this lesson. And I would say that Russia, to a certain extent, with its emerging oligarchies, the rule by the wealthy, and certainly the United States in its present deterioration from high values. I can't say much about the UK. I don't know enough about it. But there is a general tendency for flight into the material, into the personal, into the obvious, into the superficial, and we're not really dealing with the soul, and we have to once again do that. And as student esotericists, we have to find a way to be part of this propagating of ideas that helps people understand that. Students would do well to remember that all forms of possessions and all material objects, whether it is money or a house, a picture, or an automobile, have an intrinsic life of their own, an emanation of their own, and an activity which is essentially that of their own inherent atomic structures, for an atom is a unit of active energy. This produces counterparts in the world of etheric or astral life. Okay, though not in the mental world, and that's interesting because it didn't rise that high. These subtler forms and distinctive emanations swell the potency of world desire. And if anything, we need the reduction, as the Buddha would say, of the factor of desire, especially as it is directed towards the phenomenal worlds, the lower 18 subplanes. They contribute to the world glamour and form part of a great and powerful miasmic world. Now, a lot of us don't feel particularly deluded, and yet, maybe we are. We're surrounded by a powerful miasmic world, which is on the involutionary arc, but in which humanity upon the upward arc is nevertheless immersed. So it's going to be a battle. The involutionary tendencies are battling with the evolutionary tendencies, and we have to make our way through them or subside and go backward into the clutches of a great material deva, such as the Black Lodge is prisoner to at this time. Therefore, the guides of the race have felt the necessity of standing by whilst the forces set up by man proceed to strip him and thus release him to walk in the wilderness. And apparently, sometimes we see, people are losing a lot of money and so forth, but, the stock market is showing wild gyrations, and people who live only for gain without thinking of the larger whole, they are set upon at this time. Maybe the end result is very important. So, and this will be the result of the great period of humanity attacking its dweller and being attacked by its dweller. So, they're in what is called straitened circumstances, and that's all of us, one day. We don't need a whole lot to really have spiritual values, and that will be proven in the new esoteric schools. They're in what is called straitened circumstances. Can he readjust his life and change his way of living, thus discovering that freedom from material things carries with it its own beauty and reward, its own joy and glory. Thus he is liberated to live the life of the mind. So this is the promise of what can happen when we liberate ourselves from our ancient desires for these crude, concrete precipitations in which we seem to place all value. But the liberation is coming. Well, okay, this was a rather, lengthy session here, and I'm not going to go any further. I was going to take some other stuff, but no, it's too much. So I'm going to make this disappear and put this up at the conclusion of what we've just been through. We would be dealing with the glamour of sentiment, but we'll deal with that next time. All right, it's something we're all given to, and a lot of second-rate people are certainly given to the glamour of sentiment. So it's something that is important in the life of so many of us. We're only going a few pages at a time, but trying to go as deeply as possible. All right, friends, so here we are. It's been a lengthy section on the glamour of materiality. The cause of materiality, I think, is a dull perception of reality, and also a veiling of that perception by the forces of the astral plane. It's just a mistake in values. We value what is not real, what is evanescent, and we fail to value the true causes of the higher world, such as may be found within the egoic lotus causal body that we are building in order to live the higher life. Right. So forgive me for talking so much on this one. And I want to now, do you have anything you want to say about this glamour of materiality? Some of the things that we've dealt with. It's already disappearing. The wilderness experience lies ahead of us. Are we equal to that? Our quality of consciousness is our true value, and we must not imagine that there is an absolute hierarchy of demands, because people who are not there yet, they need other things than people who are there. Let's put it like that. I think that's enough to think about. All right.
Michael?
Yes, Michael.
Francois has had his hand raised.
Okay. We've just got to find that. Whoa. Oh, here. Oh, Francois Boulanger? Okay. All right. So, attendee is self-muted and muted by the organizers. So, Francois, you're self-muted. And if you wish to speak, there you go. Okay.
No, sorry, Michael. That was my mistake.
You're good. You're good.
I'm good. Thank you.
So did you have something that you wanted to say here, or maybe not yet?
Not yet, Michael. Thank you.
Okay, Francois. Very good, very good. Okay.
Olivia has her hand raised now.
Okay. Let's get there. Let's get there. Okay, and click to unmute. And there you are, Olivia. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Well, so often we are very aware of how challenging it is for so many people living in poverty and the struggles. But Global Citizen organization just came out with 7 charts that show how the world is actually becoming a better place in some areas, and it's not all bad news. So for people, sometimes we need that little spark of how things are improving. So this Swedish academic Hans Rosling showed that, of course, we have all this focus on catastrophes, suffering, terrorist attacks, wars, famines, but he has done some research and he pointed out every day some 200,000 people around the world are lifted above the $2 a day poverty line. So that's some of the good news. And that more than 300,000 people a day get access to electricity and clean water for the first time every day. So sometimes we need to hear these encouraging thoughts because we're so aware of all the suffering and poverty in the world.
Yes.
And the idea, too, of what we see so much in the Western world of the growing disparity, between like company executives and the regular employees, where the rich are getting richer and the disparity increases. And he includes, and I'll just end with this, a really wonderful quote by Nelson Mandela, that poverty is man-made and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. So definitely the ball is in our court.
Yes, and as budding esoteric workers, we know what the causative level is, and we have to work esoterically to help people overcome the glamour, which links them to this superficial valuation. Basically, if we all value money above what it is that money is meant to produce, we are in a very superficial kind of perception. So maybe, we have to work on this angle, and I think it is happening. Now, the wilderness experience, okay, he pretty much promises us that. What he has also promised us is that the first 720 years of the age of Aquarius will be under Saturn and will produce much difficulty, as he says. So, Saturn is the great teacher, and I think that we're going to be in a position where water rights, land rights, all kinds of things will have to be worked out. The principle of sharing, that's the thing. And Christ cannot return unless that is, working along.
Right. The idea of what you're saying, that we really don't own anything. We just need to be good stewards of whatever we have. And the thought, too, that you're referring to, Christ needs money for the work. So the money we do have to direct it in that way.
It's a symbol, it's a symbol, but we tend to value the symbol for its material possibilities. We really have to change our desire nature, change our sense of values. Now, how does the sense of values change? Oftentimes when you present to people the contrast between what they can gain by what they presently desire compared to what they can gain by what they might aspire towards. So, a sense of values has to be readjusted, and the whole political area is meant to bring that forward, because the sense of values is the adjusting of the sense of values is the work of the initiate upon the first ray, where you're going to find so many of those. Here, I think it is page 507, and here it is. The preservation of values is the task of the initiate of the first ray, those who are working in the political arena. And so often we find instead some kind of greedy acquisition instead of this. And then for people like ourselves, a lot of us, the attainment of positivity is the goal of the initiate of the second ray. Now, that requires a lot of thought as to what that really may mean, and all the rays are given here in terms of their initiate expression. So, I just would recommend that everybody be aware of where this paragraph is, page 507 in the rays and the initiations. It's a good one. It's really a good one. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see, Michael. Okay, we have, I don't know, maybe Veronique has been asking for something. Wait. Oh. Okay, and we have Frida and we have Veronique here both. I'm not sure. Something is typed there in a language I don't recognize. The banksters and all of that. Well, I think Iceland had a sort of a unique response to a number of these banking people that were getting the world economy into such trouble. They basically put them in prison. Of course, it's a small nation and it's relatively uncorrupted. We have instead the idea of something being too large to fail, banks being too large to fail because they drag down the whole system. But basically, we are beginning, our work is very subtle, and it's beginning with the psychological level. And we have to demonstrate this in our lives as well. And thereby, as DK says, fourth point, set an example, And if we can really work with our creative imagination in meditation, we can, and using the formulas, we can begin to attack the unreality of a slavish devotion to the symbols of value. The symbols of value are not the value itself. It's just a convenience that we have for exchanging values. We have to increase the quality of our values and find a way to detach ourselves from the symbols we use to exchange that which is of value. There's all kinds of bad stuff going on, but we as students of these things, we have to have a very clear mind, very clear meditative attitude, and then go in there and use the techniques that have been given to us. So that's an answer a little bit to Veronique. Okay, and Frida, what you wanted to say was that the impact of fire on communities, destroying their homes. In Canada, that is happening in the heavy oil capital of Alberta. Fort McMurray, and in California, it was a town called Paradise. Yeah. Well, okay. Things are being taken out of our hands. And, but as DK said, there's a great beauty in living the life which is unencumbered by materiality. We use materiality because, well, in the Aquarian age, we're going to have a spiritual type of materialism. If you really think about it, let's see, I wonder if I could go to a place where I could find what I'm looking for very quickly. I'm going to be looking for this in the AAB diagrams, and it's not Parabram, but it's going to be something like that. Okay, so basically, 1, 2, and here it is. And basically, what we're going to see here is that Aquarius rules the very lowest of the spiritual hierarchies, having to do with the production of material things. So it is possible that we will have a material attitude which has been spiritualized. Now, if we went higher, there was a man in Finland who had an elaborate theory. He went up onto the cosmic planes, and he also placed the zodiacal constellations up there and did not simply end with Aquarius on this level. One of the places you'd see Aquarius, for instance, would be here. In other words, if Pisces rules the third subplane of the cosmic astral plane, Aquarius would rule the second subplane, and Capricorn the first subplane, and on it would go into areas of speculation there where we're not really at home, but we can understand what the trend is. Suffice it to say that Aquarius is not an impractical sign, not at all, and a kind of the spiritualizing of matter is going to be a major task under the Aquarius dispensation, and a lot of that, I dare say, is going to be prepared in the first 720 years, the first decanate of Aquarius. I'm trying to think what is, goodness, what is that? Is it the cross? I'm not sure. Tuya, do you remember in Aquarius what is the very first decanate? I know that the second decanate is the charioteer, and the third decanate, I think, is the fish drinking from the waters. But I'm forgetting the first decanate, whatever. But suffice it to say, when it's under Saturn, Saturn is a planet that rules the cosmic physical plane. It's the permanent atom of the cosmic physical plane. And therefore, a lot will be straightened out materially during the Saturn decanate, as difficult as it may be for us, because he does promise difficulty. He basically tells us we're going to enter Aquarius, the average person under Venus, the disciple under Saturn, but mankind as a whole under Saturn. So, hence the difficulty and facing up to what has to be accomplished. Okay. Now,
Okay, Michael.
Yes.
Natni's hand is raised, and then Ario's.
Okay, and I also see Tuya, so I'm going to give her that chance to speak, and then we'll get on to Ario and Natnia. Okay, go ahead, Tuya.
Yes, I couldn't speak, Michael.
Okay, well now you can.
You were, yes. So the first decanate of Aquarius, did you ask that?
Yes.
Yes, it's Cygnus.
The great swan. Okay, yeah. Sometimes representing the soul, and sometimes the symbol for the fourth initiation, under which Aquarius is one of the signs of the third, fourth, and fifth initiation. So Cygnus, okay, very good. A huge and beautiful, and really it has to do with the tremendous elevation that becomes possible. So thank you for stepping in on that. Now, let's see. Okay, Natnia. Yes, Natnia, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
There you are.
There I am. Yes, at last. I want a very basic explanation. It's page 76 in Glamour. We just read it.
Yeah.
That it's about the miasmic world, which is on the involutionary arc, but in which humanity, upon the upward arc, is nevertheless immersed. I want you to explain that
I wish I
please.
could. I wish I could. I'd love to be able to.
No, I mean about involutionary and upward.
Well,
Basically.
Yeah, there are three kingdoms, on the involutionary arc, and I wonder if I can find the map that shows this. Okay, I'm going to do my best here. There it is. Okay. So as you see, the first elemental kingdom, the second, and the third are descending into greater materiality, and they have to do with the atomic nature of matter. And the purpose of this descent is densification. Make something more and more complicated rather than freer and more simple. So it's only the mineral kingdom itself that begins the upward arc. And humanity is found here in its astral body, its mental body, its physical body, and it's encountering the downward densification of the material element, which is leading away from the simplification which it is trying to achieve. So that is a problem, and basically the people who are not trying to evolve into spirituality, they are captured by these dense material tendencies from these what can I call them? They are involutionary kingdoms. They have yet to round the turn. They will become mineral, and they will become the astral body and all that, but not yet. And so we are trying towards freedom, and they are trying towards increased boundedness, if I can put it that way. And so the tendencies, it's a bit like swimming upstream. The current is against you, but you know what you're doing, and you exert all of your power to make your way through the tendency towards densification, complexification, and materialization. I guess, that's all I can say about it. We could research more about this, but suffice it to say, the involutionary arc is not over yet. And because it is heading downward, those that are heading upward have trouble with it and can be swept off the good path onto the path of materiality. And one of the interesting things he did say is that who are the members of the Black Lodge, the Lords of Form? They are human beings who are captured by a great material deva who has to do with the dense physical body of the planetary logos. And as you can see here, these beings here are largely involved in the dense physical body of the planetary logos. There's also the solar logos, and its density, its material body, is the 21 lower subplanes. So even our causal body is material from that point of view. So suffice it to say, it's a struggle. The stream is going in two directions. We exert ourselves against a densification stream that could stop us if we don't have sufficient will, aspiration, and all the rest of it. So I guess, it's not a perfect explanation, but at least it shows you the map where this is happening. And
thank you.
Okay, Natia, okay. I mean, I wish I knew it all, but I don't with respect to this. And all I can say is complexity increases. And when you start this way, simplicity increases until you reach that point. I guess we can call it the sea of fire, where you're going to find the smallest of all units on the cosmic physical plane, and it is called the bubble in the koilon. I know it's a funny kind of thing, but you know, it's a tiny, tiny unit, and who knows if it's the tiniest unit on the cosmic physical plane. We just don't know about the material nature of the cosmic astral plane and all that kind of thing. But it takes about, I think, if I remember it correctly, from the Keys to Theosophy, or Jinara Jadasa. He was the president of the Theosophical Society, I think, in the 20s. And basically, he said it takes about 14 billion bubbles in the koilon to make what we call a permanent atom on the etheric plane. 14 billion bubbles in the koilon. So somehow there's simplification. It's taking less and less and less because there's a de-aggregation. You can understand that there's a boundedness that occurs when you complexify, and a rigidity, and there's no freedom. But on the upward path, we loosen things up and eventually achieve a great freedom for what is called our spirit nature, the flying essence, the volatile essence, the very core of our monad, which is the inner fire. It flies free and is no longer bound. Anyway, that's the principle of it. Now, as far as the chemical, physical details, we'll leave it to theosophists who are specifically in that field. Okay. Yeah.
Yes,
You know.
that did help a bit.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, you bet. Okay, now let's see. I'm just looking here. Vera, you go ahead, and then I see Veronique too. Go ahead, Vera.
So now I'm confused.
Good.
So with continuation of what you were just talking about, this involution and evolution.
Involution and evolution. Yeah.
So therefore, even the animals are on evolutionary arc.
They are, and so are the minerals, and so are some of the material of which their vehicles may be composed are aiming in the other direction. So the essence of these kingdoms is trying to rise upward and creating transitional forms. He says there are some very interesting transitional forms between mineral and vegetable, between vegetable and animal. Sometimes we see, let's say, give you an idea, the Venus flytrap, you know, it captures insects and, you know, is it an animal? Is it a plant? What is it? It's transitional. And now we have, you know, domestic animals in a transition between the animal kingdom and the human. And now we have aspirants and disciples and initiates making the transition between the human kingdom and the kingdom of souls. And that kind of transition would go on and on. But let's just say, you know, what is it? The law of the pump. I think Master Moria talks about that. The greater the downward pressure, the more likely it is to rise into freedom. I'm just paraphrasing that idea, but I could go, you know, looking for it, but that's enough of the idea, I think. So it's never a free ride. We really are the salmon swimming upstream. There are all kinds of bears and other animals ready to grab at us, you know, as we batter ourselves against the rocks. But eventually comes the freedom and liberation through death and into the higher worlds. So definitely, like St. Paul knew, he was a Scorpio, so, you know, things are really contradictory, but he said, "O wretched man that I am, who can save me from the body of this death?" And basically, you know, that which I would do, I do not do. That which I would not do, I do. And then the last sentence, who can save me from the body of this? So we are the fourth kingdom of nature. And we are also the fourth creative hierarchy. And we cannot for a minute think that we shall make progress without great resistance against our progress. It's happening all the time. And thus we get stronger, and thus we get stronger as we do. Who was saying that which does not kill you, makes you stronger. I just heard that the other day again. And that's how it is on the path of discipleship. There's, what does he say? We've tread the thorny path of occultism, which means we've been stuck by plenty of thorns, and we're pretty battered up, by the time we rise into the higher planes of greater freedom.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are you ready to be? Does it resonate? Does this happen? I guess all of us have to, because here's the thing. Sometimes the dangers are not the obvious ones. Sometimes the dangers are very subtle. And he says that there are these forces that are, quote, warring militantly against the aspirant. And they want to, press the aspirant down into the lower levels of confinement, just like where they are, in a certain sense, captured by this great material deva. Okay. All right.
Audio is still waiting.
Yes, I'm going to get to Ariel right now. Okay, and there you go, Ariel.
Okay. I just think that this glamour of materialism is also one reason for climate crisis.
Yes.
And also that thing that this use of materials, they are purposely used ineffectively. Than this first, for example, this utilization of plastics is one example of that.
Yeah, I've heard, DK says that there are some chemical combinations which were never meant to be created and used by humanity. And was talking to Philip Lindsay about this. I think that it does relate to the entire plastics area. And there's also some other connections with medicines and so forth. But of course, it's what can we say? People don't believe in reincarnation. They don't believe that what they do, that, they're making their own bed and they will have to lie in that bed. They don't believe that they are determining their future. It's like, I'm out of here. That's it. I don't worry about it because I won't be here. But what if they will be here? That's why the spreading of the doctrine of reincarnation, which is one of the things that the Christ will teach this time especially, he didn't emphasize it so much last time, is of the utmost importance. So, when I'm in a conversation with somebody, I really make sure that the principle of reincarnation is established. So we can understand, I'm not a man, I'm not a woman, all that kind of stuff. I could be either one, and I'm determining my own destiny, and my subjective nature is what's important, and not the material nature, which is just a means to increase consciousness in the subjective nature. So everything is turned upside down, in terms of normal human values. But okay, we have look, but it is the age of Aquarius, and let's put it like this: it's the age of free energy. It will be coming. The free energy will be coming. Now, there's no way to stop that, but sometimes the hierarchy works very hard to make sure that things don't happen too fast before, humanity is ready to deal with them. Because, you can have a lot of problems through premature availability of energies which can do damage. Now, why in the world from 1950 to the year 2000, at least that, the fifth ray ashram was quieted down, and it no longer was independent because it was achieving much too fast for humanity's moral level. And, we could have really done harm to ourselves. So it was put out of commission for maybe 50 years. And the fifth ray worked under the third ray during that time. So humanity is very interested in not letting, rather the hierarchy, interested in not letting the plan be too rapidly unveiled, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else, Arya?
Okay.
Okay.
No, I think this is just
Okay.
thing, and okay, and also this nuclear energy is also the one thing about this which you just mentioned, that maybe it has been given or found out too early.
Well, yes. Exactly. He said, this is interesting. It wasn't supposed to be discovered by humanity until the age of Capricorn, 2,000 something years ahead. Now that's really interesting. So that's a bit premature, isn't it? But, humanity having achieved that, the hierarchy has to respond. And of course, there's different aspects of nuclear energy, the very destructive side and also the constructive side, the fusion aspect. So, we're heading into a time when our dependence upon energy will be on an entirely different type of energy. And it will be fought against because it gives everybody an opportunity and not just a few. So the egotistical people of the world, who are the wealthy, egotistical types, they will fight against it. Anyway, we continue to work subjectively. Okay. Thank you,
Okay,
Aryu.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aryu. Okay, now where am I? Yeah, go ahead.
Leslie has written that she's not sure if it's accurate, but the all-knowing internet says that the quote that you were giving, that which does not kill us makes us stronger,
Yes.
is attributed to Nietzsche.
Nietzsche, the German philosopher. Well, okay. Nietzsche said a lot of good things and was misinterpreted in a lot of ways. So that sounds right. He was, of course, used by the German supremacists, and in many ways he was a weak man, and he projected compensatorily into some sort of superhuman being, which was more a hope than a reality for him. But he, I don't know if you've ever, he was, Nietzsche had 29 degrees of Scorpio rising. I think he was a Libra and had a lot of Sagittarius. And there's an old joke, you know how Nietzsche famously said, God is dead, Nietzsche. And then there's another statement after that, Nietzsche is dead, God. So I guess we see who's, on top there. But it was a tragic life and loads of the fourth ray in his nature. Okay, here we have, now let's see here. Leslie? Yeah, okay, so Leslie did this. Thank you.
Yes, and then Waiting for Name writes, just an observation. The different forms of energy entering our planet's magnetosphere is affecting all of the kingdoms in evolution, man, animal, and mineral, and all lower matter. The evolution or involution, ? Is pushed in and through all matter, these energetic flows.
Yes. Okay, so all I can say is a general statement that there are forms of energy of which we know nothing thus far. He's always assuring us of that, and aspects of divinity of which we know nothing. But he's saying we will begin to encounter them in the age of Aquarius, because after all, Aquarius in a way rules the entire head center, the great radiation of the center at the top of the head. And it's connected with all different kinds of energies, so many of which are not yet revealed to us. And I think the hierarchy has to be very careful about what it allows in and what it emphasizes. Because, I think my guess is that they always feel that there's more risk in going too fast than in taking a steady and deliberate speed. I think people can get into all kinds of trouble if they rush the process. So we have to be very aware of what some of these energies are. And you know, one of the big energies that's going to be coming in during this age of Aquarius is some kind of scientific documentation of what we call the energy of the soul, which will be discovered in a scientific sense. We talk about it all the time, and we act as if we are in connection with it and cultivating its permeation of our vehicles. But as far as humanity is concerned, it's unknown. And what if it does, under the work of France with its fifth ray Piscean soul, what if it does really emerge as a reality, not just a religious, hoped for type of supposed reality, but the real thing that can be measured. So all of these impacts, not all, okay, but many impacts will be now registered by humanity, which have not been registered before, and hopefully the hierarchy will be with us to give us guidance about that kind of registration. Okay, so thanks for that.
The last thing is,
yeah.
Alexandra would like to stay on after the webinar to talk with you, Tuya, and Olivia.
Okay, all right, fantastic. I just have to make sure that I don't close everybody off. Okay, and so this is Jan. Jan was the waiting for name. Speaking of the interaction from the cosmos, it's happening all the time, and we don't see it, and we feel it through. Oh, do we feel it though? Yes, and more, and we'll be able to identify the sources. It's not given yet, Jan, that all energies which might be available should be available. I'm recalling how the second ray Solar Logos, second ray at this time, rejects the energy of the first ray from cosmic sources, rejects it at least in its full possible measure, because it has to concentrate upon the consciousness aspect. So many things are available, but not necessarily sanctioned by the hierarchy. They kind of, under the law of assembly, they get things together and they decide, you know, what we can really trust humanity with. Okay, Michael, Stacy, that was a question. I mean, that's fine. It's not a problem. We'll stay on, Olivia, Tuya, and myself with you, and we can talk about the upcoming vigil. We can do that. And I just have to. I have such a habitual way of closing these webinars that I don't want to do that mistakenly. Okay. Now, is that it, or do we have further? Because we do have to have a meditation, and then
there are no more questions and no more raised hands.
Okay. Well, this glamour we've been working on, the glamour of materiality, it arises because the gross senses become so powerful that the subtle senses are completely dampened. They are overlaid. They are prevented from really operating. And we think that what we see, what we are conscious of in the lower sense, is reality. Now, one of the great solutions to the glamour of materiality is the sensitizing of the human being. That's going to come in very, very strongly in the Aquarian age, when the seventh ray will be affecting the brains and bodies and nervous systems of human beings, and we will have the etheric vision developed among many. And because of that sensitization, we will see that the materialist is uniquely blind, and that has been pursuing, as if it were truly valuable, only a very small part of reality, and maybe the lowest part of reality altogether. So we continue with our meditation, we continue with our sensitization through occult training, and we will not fall into the pattern of materialism, and we'll be able to help others avoid it as well. Okay, good. All right, then let's proceed. And okay, this is what we use, and well, as long as we've studied it, there's so many glamours that are rife at the moment, and of course the glamour of materialism is playing into the present situation very much in the United States. Where and all places where immigration is an issue. The people coming in are supposed to be taking jobs away from those who are already present, because they will work for less and people will not get what they want, and their vote will be overcome by the sheer numbers of those who are entering. There are all kinds of fears connected with the immigration process. And while I do think, that some kind of regulation is needed, I think we got rid of the Berlin Wall, didn't we? Well, why was that, And the whole idea of retrogression, of building a 3,000 kilometer wall, it's a kind of a medieval solution, and it's just not going to work. But it basically based upon denying privilege to a whole group of people and keeping it's based on selfishness. That's what it basically is, and it's based on the love of the material, because it's certainly easy to share that which is spiritually generated. You can share that, and maybe there's not enough material wealth for everybody to have the same number of things, So we do need a real alteration in our sense of values, and a type of sensitization which will prevent the belief that which is material is the most real. In fact, just as he tells us our physical body is the least real part of our makeup, so the material sphere is the least real of all the possibilities as they exist on the higher planes. Now, if those higher planes can permeate the precipitations, that's another matter, and we look forward to that time. All right, thanks everybody. So let's continue. And we'll sort of be in the silence for a little bit here as we get the sense of all of us coming together. Wherever we may be, it's a unification, and it's one group considered as a unity. So we'll go ahead. We're not going to name right now the 35 participants. If it was a smaller group, that's what's called for. A group of 9, let us say. And you're certainly welcome to start up in your areas. Smaller groups which can participate in this work to rid the human and planetary psyche of glamour. So we'll use the protective formula with that unique divine cross, and as we do that, we'll see the cross shine with a deflecting light, a protective light. As a soul, I work in light, and darkness cannot touch me. I take my stand within the light, I work, and from that point, I never move. And before each of the members, that cross is found, and in general, before the entire group. As a protection, this is work not to be entered into lightly. It's the area where the counterforce attacks humanity most frequently, and they're not going to welcome our interference in these matters. So we're going to work with light, and we bring it from the light of matter in the lower part of the personality upward to the mental level, and the light of the mind is there found, the thinking, reasoning, rational aspect of thinking. And those two lights, the vital light of matter and the light of the mind, blend and fuse. And then we think about the soul light as if hovering above the head, or however you want to visualize this, maybe as coming through and from the causal body, however you wish to visualize it. And we contact that light, at least in our imaginations. And we bring down that light of the soul. We imagine it being brought down into that lower level of vibration we call the lower mental plane, and especially its fourth level. And we blend all three lights: the soul light, the light of ordinary mind, and the vital light of matter. An intense fusion of three lights. The triple light is one, and from this light, our searchlight will be created. Each one of us has a searchlight, and blended together creates the great searchlight and dissipating weapon, we might say, against the glamour. So, we say together, appreciating the oneness of the triple light. The light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. And then we enter the section where we focus on the formula, and as a group we say the following: radiance are we, and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus, with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. So we're visualizing a great searchlight formed of the many individual searchlights, and this searchlight arising out of the triple light as one casts its beam upon the astral plane. And we will add to this group searchlight an empowerment of the spiritual will with the mantra, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. That goal, of course, is going to be the dissipation of glamour in general, and whatever glamour we begin to work with. And since we have studied it, let us indeed work with the glamour of materiality and think about it for a minute, and all that humanity loses of spiritual value because this glamour of materiality is so powerful and does exist. So we think about what it has done to the human psyche and behavior. And certainly this glamour has contributed greatly to wrong human relations, and a spiritual approach to the material element could contribute so much to right human relations. So let us then utter these words of power and enter deeply into them. And as we do so, we're visualizing the light penetrating into the glamour and producing its weakening and dissipation. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of materiality or materialism. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour of materialism from affecting humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour of materialism. Now let there be the 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose as this work of dissipating the glamour of materialism is seen to be proceeding. 5 minutes of silence and intensity of purpose. So this is going to be a very stubborn glamour, and one to which we can constantly address ourselves. We will withdraw our beam back onto the mental plane and realize that some work in weakening and dissipating the glamour of materialism has been accomplished, and a higher sense of values put in its place, and a greater sensitivity which will reveal those values. And we turn off then the searchlight of the soul. And realizing that work is being done within the personality, we sound the Om 3 times to acknowledge the 3 aspects and this work which we are accomplishing together. So, you know, and as we work with these glamours during the week that follows, let us study them and let us see if we can see how they operate. Maybe we identify them in the news that we receive, in the operation of governments and churches and social organizations and so forth. Maybe we can see these glamours in operation, and the next time we approach, be even more effective in dissipating. So, all right. Thank you for attending this work, and we're going to continue with the Ask program tomorrow. We're on the evening schedule, and it's the work with the soul of nations, and then on Sunday night, the work attracting money for hierarchical purposes. And then on Tuesday, and we're getting that together for you, those who wish to participate, since the relationship between the United States, the United Kingdom, and Russia is so important, we're going to be focusing in supportively to promote the best and most unitive outcome that can arise from the vote that's going to be taken in the Parliament of the UK. So we'll get to you. You know, you'll be using partially the live link from YouTube, and then presuming that we have a webinar so that you can discuss this somewhat, we'll create a link and get that to you through the constant contact, through the student union, through the different media, and so forth. So we have a lot of work coming up, and we want to add our esoteric understanding to the process and act as if, you know, that it really does work. So, you know, he for whom the whole world waits has said that whatsoever shall be asked in his name, and with faith in the response, shall see it accomplished. So now I'm going to just ask Alex, Olivia, Tuya, and myself to remain. We have some planning to do for this Brexit work, and want to thank all of you for your presence. Lots of love and many blessings from all of us.
Michael, I would say remember to turn your recording off.
Yes,
I just stopped it.
I was just on my way. You stopped it on your side, but it's still going for me.